That's right. The meeting is recorded also, just so y'all know. I'm trying myself to pull up that event program that I just dropped so that I can tell you all about Andrew, who we're very excited to welcome this evening as our featured reader. And he had hoped to join us in person here, but it was not in the cards. So he is zooming in virtually from Colorado, and we're really excited about that. He is the author of 3 novels, The Gringa, a finalist for the 2021 Colorado Book Award, Deus Ex Machina, which NPR called one of the best novels about American culture in years. That's a rave. And Lady Lazarus. His short fiction and essays have appeared in Esquire, McSweeney's, The Wall Street Journal, Plowshares, Fence, One Story, and others, and in several anthologies. He's a former Wallace Stegner Fellow and Jones Lecturer at Stanford, and has received fellowships from all kinds of awesome foundations. He's the founding books editor at the Rumpus, love the Rumpus, and the director at the San Jose Center for the Literary Arts from 2009 through 15. And in 2016, co-authored Writers on Trump, an open letter objecting to the Trump campaign that was signed by nearly 500 writers, including 10 Pulitzer Prize winners. Thank you for that work. Andrew's now a contributing editor at ZZYBA and director of the creative writing program at Colorado State in Fort Collins. Wow, we're really excited to have you. Please, Andrew, stop me from babbling.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you to the Inner Loop, which is a great reading series that I've known about for some time, and I'm so pleased to join you this month. I had hoped, and I really thought we were going to make it, that I'd be able to come out and meet you all in person and read and just kind of share in the good time. But you know, we're learning new ways to have good time recently. So here we are, and I want to thank everybody for coming out, and to specifically thank Courtney and Rachel for inviting me, and Kira and Dan for the work you're doing on tonight's event. And I don't know that I really need to say much else before I get started. You're welcome for the Writers on Trump letter. I only wish it could have been more effective, but we do what we can. So I'm going to read tonight from my most recent novel, which is called The Gringa, and it was published with just exquisite timing on March 10th, 2020, which I now think of as the day before all of our lives ended, because the following day, the World Health Organization declared that we were in a global pandemic. So that was a lot of fun. I had a great book tour, as you can imagine. But it's really nice to get a chance to read a section from it to all of you tonight. So the Gringa was inspired by a real story about an American woman, 26-year-old American woman who was arrested in Lima, Peru in the mid-90s, and charged with collaborating with a leftist militant group who had been designated by the Peruvian government as terrorists. And she was convicted in a 20-minute trial in a military court and sentenced to life in a military prison, where she ended up serving 15 years and then 5 more years of parole before she was freed. In this novel, that character's name is Leonora Gelb, and the novel is narrated by an American expat, a kind of failed novelist, layabout, generally irresponsible guy living in Peru, and known to readers only by the name of Andres. And he has been commissioned by a sort of ethically challenged website to write a profile of Leonora Gelb on the occasion of her parole 10 years after her arrest and imprisonment. So he's trying to figure out who she is. He's trying to figure out how she became this person who, you know, grew up in in privilege in the United States and was one day arrested in what was called a terrorist safe house in Peru. So this is a section from the middle of the book where he is sort of recounting and partly imagining her college years at Stanford University, where he imagines she was radicalized, I suppose is the word for it. The only other thing you need to know is that she, as a sophomore, she's been auditing a graduate seminar on underground revolutionary movements and dating a graduate student in that seminar, a somewhat older man, an African-American man named Martin Lee. So this is from the Gringa. Martin Lee, who since 2002 has served as a California state assemblyman for an East Oakland district, remembers Leonora Gelb as, quote, crazy smart, a little confused about things. In his description, her ardor and focus were miscast among students who viewed protest as another form of resume building and social justice as a competitive arena. They saw each other throughout the fall of 1990, though he doesn't characterize the relationship as a serious one. They frequently went out after the seminar, ending the night in her co-op's kitchen where they'd share a bottle of wine while Martin recounted his latest trip to El Salvador or talk about his childhood on the south side of Chicago. Leo could hardly mask her admiration. Here was someone who saw the bubble from the outside, who knew it for the cruel, racist lie that it was. She spent weekends at his house in Berkeley, where he lived with 6 activists and community organizers, all Black, all several years older. They greeted her with nods and polite smiles, referred to her as Martin's groupie or the white girl. She knew she deserved their suspicion. Why should they accept her when she'd done nothing to earn their respect? In November, she and Martin joined a protest outside the office of Stanford's president to demand the hiring of more minority faculty. When Martin and a handful of others forced their way into the building, he told Leo to stay outside. They were arrested an hour later, dragged onto a bus while reporters trotted alongside. She watched from a bench as they pumped their fists out the bus windows and flashed victory signs. I should have been inside, she said that night after bailing him out of jail. I shouldn't have listened to you. Martin lay on his bed, hands clasped behind his head. It wasn't the place for you, he said. How's it going to look if you're on that bus? Through the floor, she could hear music, his housemates joking in quick, easy voices. She crossed her arms and said, it would look like solidarity. Who cares what it looks like? Look like white guilt, Martin said. The phrase stung. All quarter, sitting to the side, while the grad students clustered at the seminar table, she'd struggled with it. What was she doing out here, pretending to care what happened inside the bubble? What was the point? Listen, Martin said. He sat up, his voice gentle. Too gentle. Leo felt a stab of alarm. I know you want to help, but it's not your fight. What do you got on the line? She felt heat rising in her face. She would not say, my self-respect, or much the same thing, my desire to live in a better world. Me, she thought. However you spun it, there was something grimy and selfish about her, something that undermined every ideal she espoused. Even Martin, she thought, flushing with self-hatred, wasn't part of the attraction what being with him said about her. Why does it matter, she said petulantly, clutching at something that was rapidly receding. If I'm ready to fight for your liberation, why do my reasons matter? His sad smile was a blow to the gut. Because you think it's my liberation, he said. She returned to Stanford from winter break to a campus galvanized by the prospect of war. There was a line in the sand, boots on the ground, American flags and support our troops signs on the lawns of Palo Alto, as they were in Cannondale, New Jersey, her hometown. This is our Vietnam, cried the campus demonstrators. Read my lips, no blood for oil, chanted students outside the Hoover Institute. There were honk-ins and walkouts, impromptu concerts on Sarah Quad. On the night President Bush's ultimatum expired, Leo drifted at the edge of a candlelight vigil under skies that seeped orange rain. Save the Iraqis, read the homemade signs. War is harmful to children. The students sang songs written before they were born. They hugged each other and cried real tears, and as midnight approached, They looked mournfully to the sky as if expecting to see fighter jets in formation, slashing the darkness like a cat's claws. These poor, poor people, a familiar voice said into her ear. Where's your candle, Leo? What if old George is looking down and saying, if that redhead chick's got a candle, I'll call off the troops? The air smelled of patchouli oil and early jasmine, the fog so thick it felt cottony. She hadn't seen Martin in months, had refused to let herself leave pathetic messages. Save your sympathy for the Iraqi people, she told Martin, groaning at her own cliche. Saddam must be sleeping easier knowing these rich kids are on his side, Martin said. She tried to punch him, but she didn't have the energy. It was all pointless. The war, the candles, just another scripted drama. What about you, Leo? He said. Are you on someone's side? In San Francisco's Civic Center the next day, she followed him through a crowd of thousands, a surly and liquid mass that swelled and shifted, insinuating itself between buildings, swamping police lines, thumping drums and clanging pots and pans in an endless rattle that set the nerves on edge. The weather had cleared, the sky packed with fist-shaped clouds that wheeled around City Hall's gold dome. Speakers shouted into bullhorns, cursing President Bush and the oil companies. Signs stabbed the air. Stop the madness. Fags against war. An eye for an eye does not equal justice. As waves of outrage rolled through the plaza in deep orgasmic shudders. She hadn't eaten. Hunger and the buzz of coffee brought a sweat to her hairline. Unshowered under her long-sleeved shirt, she could smell her own slightly horsey scent mixed with his sharp musk. She was supposed to be in the library, working on an art history paper. While the bombs fell, while innocent people were maimed and incinerated, she was supposed to write a paper on Caravaggio. Unthinkable. She knew this was how most people lived, by somehow finding ways to write papers on Caravaggio while children in other countries were murdered. But Leonora would not be like most people. If you're doing this, you gotta be ready, Martin had said at dawn. He told her to wear black, to take off her rings, leave her ID at home. They'd taken the train from Palo Alto and Leo practiced glaring at well-dressed commuters until they turned away. As the sun moved behind the stately buildings, the undertow shifted toward Market Street and the financial district. The crowd was still growing, fed by side streets, a cacophony of car horns met by angry howls. Leo's pulse banged in her head. Cops in riot gear lined the sidewalk. Cries of pig and fascist, followed by the crack of glass bottles against plastic shields, metal thuds as bodies were thrown across the hoods of cars. Martin pulled her through the current and into a courtyard where a dozen men and women clustered nervously. A pink-faced teenager with a shaved head and full-sleeve tattoos handed out ski masks. Leo clutched hers in both hands and looked at Martin. You can still go home, he said. Vamonos, the tattooed kid said. As they neared Powell Street, the crowd barely moving, Leo kept her eyes on Martin's back. Into her head came a litany of things she needed to do. The Caravaggio paper, another on Plath and Sexton. It was her turn to clean the co-op kitchen. Her father's birthday was next week and she still hadn't bought him a gift. Her stomach hardened into a hot nut. Children were going to die for no reason, she reminded herself. What did Renaissance art matter? A few feet away, a naked woman painted with blue and orange flames hurled herself at a policeman. You fucking murderers, she screamed, you baby killers. The cop barely got his shield up in time. 3 others grabbed the woman's flailing limbs and she growled deep in her throat and spat at one cop's face mask and he pulled a canister from his belt and sprayed her in the eyes. Leo felt herself duck, felt something whiz overhead and then a great shattering as the window of a shoe store evaporated. Her mind was whirling. This was the real thing, not a lecture or a photograph. She looked up at the surrounding office buildings where tiny faces watched the melee from dozens of windows. She couldn't imagine what they saw. Wait, Leo said, snatching at Martin's sleeve. He shrugged her off. The air was suddenly bitter with smoke. Where are we going? But he was already forging ahead. Someone handed her a length of heavy pipe and then they were pushed apart by a riptide of bodies in skin-tight skeleton suits who rushed across the street, leaping onto cars and barreled full force into the police line. At the next intersection, the Chevron building soared skyward out of a cloud of white smoke like the space shuttle on its launch pad. Its gilded revolving doors were guarded by an arc of police cruisers and orange water barrels, beyond which was mayhem. Cops and protesters colliding, spinning in pairs as if it were a lurid high school dance. She couldn't find Martin, couldn't breathe through the smell of gasoline. The pipe hung heavy at her side. A surge in the crowd knocked her off balance, and when she righted herself, they were sprinting past, a dozen bodies in black masks smashing into the cops with loud grunts and the clamor of metal on pavement, and then she was running after them, struggling to get closer to those golden doors. She could hear herself screaming. She stumbled and went down, and a pile of bodies fell on top of her and rolled and quickly scattered, and as she climbed to her feet, a skeleton suit barreled into her, and she shoved him back with an animal cry and shook herself free. Step by step, she pushed forward, dazzled by flames, until she was only a dozen yards from the revolving doors. And when the smoke briefly cleared, she saw a body on the ground set upon by 5 cops, one of whom tore off the attacker's mask, while the rest slammed nightsticks at his limbs, drove the butts into his belly, kicked at his ribs. She couldn't move. The sirens wailed, and the man on the ground curled up and rolled side to side, but she could not make herself move forward. When the cop holding the mask took a running step and aimed his boot at Martin's head, Leo dropped the pipe she was still holding and ran. Her eyes streaming, she elbowed across the current, stumbled on bottles and bricks, and tripped at the curb, tearing the flesh from her palms as she fell. She dodged through a gap in the police line and headed away from Market Street, at each intersection turning away from smoke and noise into the eerie stillness of downtown. She stopped on a dark corner to pull off the mask and retch hot mucus into a trash can. A fire engine screamed past, and she started to run again. In Union Square, there were cops everywhere, lining every sidewalk. She wiped her nose, spat in the gutter, and ducked into the first set of doors to stand blinking and heaving in the crystal white light of Macy's perfume department. Later that night, the war would begin, Baghdad lit up with tracer fire, glowing submarine green on CNN, the silent and unreal world of alien life forms doomed to extinction. There would be tomcats and prowlers, hellfire and scuds, bombs that found their targets and bombs that found something else. There would be stories about US arms sold to Saddam, doctored satellite photos, PR firms paid to invent Iraqi atrocities. And through it all, you could hear the chatter of Wolf Blitzer and Bernie Shaw, the stern compassion of Tom Brokaw, and the bland assurances of President Bush, who that first night explained to us, there are things worth fighting for. But in this moment, there was only the chilly light of the showroom, the tick and buzz of fluorescence, the whispers of other customers when they caught sight of the girl in black with a livid face and bleeding hands. Is there something I can help you with? A skinny saleswoman stood flanked by 2 coworkers. They closed ranks at the Chanel counter, trying to maintain their staged elegance, like figures in a Nagel sketch that someone is about to burn. No, Leah was shaky-kneed, her blood pounding. Police cars wailed past on Stockton Street, and blue light fractured across the mirrored counters. I'm okay, she said. I'm sorry, said the saleswoman, but you'll have to leave. Leo forced her breathing to slow. I'm looking for the men's department. The woman folded her arms. Willing her hand not to shake, Leo took her Stanford Visa card from her underwear and summoned a voice learned in the shopping malls of her youth. I'm here to buy a birthday present for my father. Is there a problem? And before they could reply, she spotted the escalator and strode past the women with chin high. She rode up 3 flights, swallowing ripples of sobs, washed her face in the ladies' room, and browsed a good long time, until her eyes dried, her limbs stopped shaking, until she found the perfect gift, a silk tie, an abstract blaze of blue and red, designed, the label said, by Jerry Garcia. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming to this. It's really an honor to participate.
My God, thank you so much. That was so intense and evocative, and I don't know, I just loved that scene at the end in the department store, like such a contrast, emotionally effective.
Thank you, Mitchell. I really appreciate it.
Okay, if I can find the program, I will introduce the next reader. We'll do 3 readers in rapid succession. Readers have 5 minutes each to read. We'll start with poetry and Lucinda Marshall.
Thank you, Rachel and Courtney, for inviting me this evening. And wow, that was quite a reading. And it brings back a lot of memories, particularly with my son, who is here tonight, which we couldn't be doing if we weren't on Zoom because he's in New York. So that's pretty awesome. And I'm also super delighted to be reading with Tara Campbell, who wrote one of the blurbs for my book, which I'm going to read a couple of poems from. This first one is called My Grandmother's Teacups. Scent memory, steep jasmine respite served with trembling hands, translucent skin covering your gnarled knuckles. I traced the china's delicate pattern with my young fingers. Be careful, you said, it's fragile. Sipping my tea now from those same cups, my hands tremble too, and I see the you in me as I become the wearer of your papery skin, an inheritance with its own design, fine wrinkles and lines, as delicate as the china that you left in my keep. And I did an interview with Anne Bracken a couple weeks ago, and it's going to be on her blog, which is annebrackenauthor.com, the end of the month, but it's got the backstory for that poem, if anybody's interested. And this next one is a poem about the desert, which is where I grew up. And a lot of this book is, it's about aging and how we become our elder selves, but also about how that influences how we find our place in the world. And I've been thinking about this poem a lot because of all that's going on with climate change in the desert now. And it's called Contemplation of Succulence in Sonora. Desert allows only agreed upon lies in the glare of its midday sun, where silhouettes must satisfy as evidence of being. I cannot tell the story of cacti or explain the prickly pear's arid juiciness, but I do know that erosion changes us, a whittling away until only bones and distillation remain to provide the grounding on which to base the tales to which we cling so fiercely. And the next poem is actually the title poem for this book. And it's based on a conversation I had a number of years ago with my mother, and it's called Inheritance of Aging Self. I do not know this old woman whose carcass of creaking bones is strung together with painfully inflamed joints, precariously attached to a hunched over spine covered with sagging, brittle skin, etched with wrinkles and punctuated with age spots, who can't remember whether pills were taken, but retains the past with unnerving clarity. She used to be my grandmother with the blue rinsed hair, telling me stories about when she was a little girl, and then became the mother caring for me before I had to tend to her, now manifest in this body that has become my own. And there's also a lengthier version of that story on my blog, which is lucindamarshall.com, which also has links to where you can get the book if anybody's interested. And this last poem is another place poem, and it's called Ebb Tide. At the edge of our long ago realm, where sand dollars were the currency of childhood kingdoms built by the sea, my footing shifts on permeable shore as the tide that once plundered our fortunes in nightly battle washes over my toes. And I wonder with a fierceness what becomes of us, of who we are in this moment before the surf falls back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucinda. Next in nonfiction, Brenna McCallick.
Hi, everyone. Before I begin, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Rachel and Courtney and to everyone in the Inner Loop community for including me here tonight. This is actually my first time sharing my creative writing in a public forum. So this is really exciting for me and just amazing to be in this group of really talented writers. So just huge thank you. The essay that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight is also kind of a reflection on place and something I've been thinking about for a while, just reflecting on my time in Washington, D.C., as somebody who grew up on the West Coast and in a very different environment than this. So hopefully this resonates with some of you. And this essay is called Transplant. Walking home from the Brooklyn Farmers Market today, I realized something. The sun was shining, the bright blue sky was blotted by a few smeared butter clouds. The trees were buzzing with hidden cicada orchestras, and a slight dampness clung to my skin. Living in the mid-Atlantic, as I've come to know it from many a Marylander correcting me for calling it generically the East Coast, teaches you things. After growing up in Southern California, I expected the winters to hit hardest when I moved to DC 3 years ago. Then I was steamrolled by my first DC summer. Nothing can really prepare a Californian for the violence of the summers here, for late afternoon downpours, for thunder and lightning in the middle of August, for hot rain. How the hell one was supposed to dress for being both overheated and damp during a work week, walking to and from a metro station 15 minutes away, was beyond me. It angered me. Why does anyone endure this? I would ask myself on my walk to work those first few weeks of summer, calf sweat pooling in my knee-high rubber boots, my rain jacket baking me like a foil-wrapped potato. On those daily summer walks to the Columbia Heights Metro from my apartment in Mount Pleasant, I would pass a row house with an inexplicable garden of cacti in the front yard. I felt a weird affinity for those plants. I texted my friend a photo of them one day. In all my life, I'd never seen cacti droop like that, waterlogged and defeated, browning as their prickly arms collapsed onto the soil. A visual representation of me in DC, I wrote. A desert dweller withering in the swamp. By the time I traded my rain boots for open, water-resistant sandals and learned that your work outfit is an entirely different outfit from what you wear while commuting to work in the summer, the lessons of this place were starting to be borne in on me. You cannot fight extremes, and there's nothing to gain in getting angry about them. To survive, you make room for them in your life. You accept defeat and adapt. Nowadays, come fall, I feel like a weathered old woman. I've seen some things, my skin announces, lingering blotches from weeks-old mosquito bites dotting my legs. I'm proud to have made it through the summer. I feel like I've won something. Today, my heart leapt as I walked down the sidewalk, lugging my farmer's market haul, and spotted tall sunflowers with their faces upturned, blocking windows, stealing light. I know in a few short weeks, those faces will be downcast, long stalks beginning their decay. I've had my fun, they'll seem to say. No regrets. 10 out of 10 would sprout fast and die young again. Impermanence, that's another lesson. The good, the bad, the lovely, the miserably hot, it all passes. My boyfriend, you mean the mid-Atlantic Marylander, reminds me that the rainstorms and the sauna heat and the insatiable mosquitoes make you appreciate the fleeting beauty of a nice day. If every day was nice, you'd never notice it. You'd find some other inconvenience to be a little bit annoyed by, a seemingly universal first-world compulsion, and you wouldn't have to repress the urge to sing at the touch of a cool breeze in September. As fall descends, bringing blissful relief from the summer heat, I'll prepare for the bitter cold of winter, for black ice, for neighborhood streets now framed by lush green trees to start resembling the languid setting of a sad movie. And then, wrapping myself in dreaded layers of winter clothing, I'll start to dream of spring. Thank you.
Awesome, Brenna, thank you. Although I've been in DC for 10 years and I refuse to accept the horrifying summers. I complain every year.
Yeah.
Next in fiction, Tara Campbell returns.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for everyone who came tonight and for inviting me back, Courtney and Rachel, to Inner Loop. I am going to read excerpt from a story from my latest book, Cabinet of Wrath, a doll collection. Actually, perfect timing for Halloween coming up. The collection of creepy doll stories. So this is
I think we've done this to you before. We've made you read creepy doll stories in October.
I am always happy to read creepy doll stories. That's, you know, call on me. I'm your creepy doll gal. So this one is called Pinot, and I love Aqueduct Press because they put so much attention into their works, and they included images for each story. So that's the image for Pinot. All Pinot ever wanted was to be a real boy until he got his wish. He'd pleaded with the fairy over and over until the wish itself seemed unreal, a vague desire for everything to be better. But when the transformation finally began, he felt heavy and thick, wobbly and weak. Muscle and sinew invaded his body like an infection, a fungus smothering the sticks of his arms and legs. He missed the slim simplicity of his torso as soon as it was encased in flesh and skin, filled with strange new pieces that gurgled and thumped, inflated and deflated. He was no longer a solid. He suddenly had an inside and an outside, and felt continually full, yet had a need to keep filling himself, to put solid things from the outside into his mouth, then break them apart, make them small again, and swallow them down into his already burgeoning inside. His first shit was traumatic. The old man had to teach him about bodies, about organs and bones, blood and skin, flesh and hair, and how to clean them, because it didn't take long before Pinot began to stink. Never before had Pinot sensed these odors, the faint stench of tobacco smoke and rotting meat emanating from the old man's mouth, the sharp tang from his own armpits, the novel musk from between his legs. The old man tried to teach Pinot how to groom himself, not to be afraid of the curves and holes and creases of his new body, or of his flaccid new penis. The old man hadn't carved it onto him, but there it was, which hung between his legs like a dinner sausage, sprouting leaks through the hole at the end or hardening at seemingly random times, making him wish he could go back to what he once was. The old man taught Pinot his trade. Pinot recoiled at the feel of the knife in his hand, clenched his teeth to counter the sensation of slicing away at something he had once been made of. He asked the old man how he could stand to hack into the same substance his son had been, how he could stand to live inside walls made of his own child's fibrous flesh. "Dear boy," said the old man, "we're not cutting things apart. We're releasing them." He taught Pinot how to know when a piece of wood was ready to work on, how to see inside of the shape it wanted to take. His father saw milkmaids and kings in those blocks of wood, saw dragons and wolves and fairies, and even in a dizzying spiral of creation, saw burly axe-toting woodcutters ready to split ever more of themselves into being. Pinot learned how to turn the material of his own birth in his new human hands, how to think of it as something else, how to feel at least a little bit better about it. The old man taught him everything he could about how to work, how to cook, how to speak with people instead of crickets, how to act like a real boy, then like a real man. Over the years, Pinot watched the old man stoop over his workshop table, over the stove, over the book in his hands, his head sinking lower and lower until he finally curled into bed and died peacefully in his sleep. The last time Pinot worked with wood was when he built his father's coffin. Then he stowed away on a ship, leaving the old country to find a new life in America. From the moment he saw the bronze woman holding up her flame in the harbor, Pinot fell in love with this new country built of metal and glass. He stepped off the boat with throngs of seekers like himself, answered the men's questions, shortened his name for them, said thank you, and tried to breathe calmly while the doctor held a stethoscope to his chest. The doctor frowned, head down, listening. Pino breathed in and out, struggling to remain calm, afraid of what would happen if the man's ears divined the splintered origins of his heart. The doctor dropped the stethoscope to his chest, then stroked his beard and squinted at Pino for an uncomfortable moment. Then, at last, he scribbled something onto Pino's paperwork and released him into his new life. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. Such a pleasure as always. I think that it is time for our intermission. Courtney?
It is that time, in fact, is what I'm seeing. So Dan is going to set up some breakout rooms. We would love if you feel like doing that. No obligation. You're welcome to turn your video off, go get food or take a potty break or whatever you need to do. But it is 8:17, so we'll say we'll meet back here at math 8:27, so 10 minutes. And yeah, please, if you're reading this evening, throw your links in the chat for everyone. We are also happy to share any other information you may need. And when we meet back up here at 8:27/8:28, we'll kick it off with our Author's Corner feature and the winners of our District Fray writing contest. So we will see you soon. Dan, how's it going?
Good. Are we ready for breakout room time?
Let's do
All
it.
right. Here we go.
Have fun. All right, I think we've got everyone back. How did it go? I'm seeing some thumbs up. That's good. That's positive. It's always nice to like feel a little awkward, get those juices flowing, have some conversation. And I think we've got a couple of new folks who are joining us for the second half, so that's great. Also, Rachel, are you there or are you getting food? Tara, you're right. Awkward is our birthright for sure.
Sorry, just having a toddler moment. Go on without me.
Will do. So we're going to get started back up here. And as we mentioned, or Rachel talked about, our Author's Corner program, and our spotlight writer for the month of October is Meg Eden. So she will be kicking us off for the second half.
I think you're on mute.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Rachel and Courtney and everyone at Interloop. This is just such an amazing program, and just everything y'all do for the DC writing community just blows my mind. And I'm so grateful we can still do this with Zoom, even if we can't be here in person. I'll share a little bit from my collection, Drowning in the Floating World. This is what's being featured in the month of October with the Author's Corner Interloop. So if you go to Potter's House, you can find the shelf there. I totally nerded out the other day seeing that. And I'll start with, let me give context. So this collection, Drowning in the Floating World, is centered around the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and Fukushima power plant disaster. So it starts kind of in literal disaster with the tsunami and the power plant, but it branches off with these ideas of water. In Japanese mythology, water just is such a rich word that means so much. And so the poems kind of diverge beyond disaster into kind of trying to find something beautiful and something hopeful despite that. I'll just read a couple poems from this. The first one I'll read is called All Summer I Wore. All summer I wore dead girls' dresses. I wore dresses I found on the shore in now empty homes. I wore the sun. I wore the muddy water that carried my neighbors' bodies. I wore the boat that rose up to become a mountain. I wore the bodies of beached dolphins. I wore washed up Chinese newspapers and Russian bottles. I wore melon crates. I wore a government handout blanket. I wore the unclaimed backpack of an elementary school boy. I wore my great-grandmother's lost tablet. I wore the names of my classmates etched in my arm. I wore altars to wash away gods. I wore a uniform from another city. I wore the laws of my father. I wore the smile girls are expected to wear. I wore the dead girls whose dresses I stole. I wore the kappa who reaches out of the lake trying to pull me under. I wore a new gospel as my shoes. I wore driftwood and got dressed for the ocean. And then I'll read a poem called Town Hall, which I seem to now read at every single thing. So if you've already heard me read this poem like 500 times, and I'm sorry, that just shows how I'm a creature of habit. I have autism, so that explains it. Town Hall. Watching the town resurrect, I remain unfixed, mouth filled with birds. My eyes are dusty and split down the middle, my bowels washed in mud. A car rests in my intestines. The dog in my chest just delivered puppies. I've been given many names: dangerous Abunai, do not enter, haite wa ikemasen. Tsunami, you may have erased my neighbors, but still I remain. I defy you, tsunami. I defy you, town. I will always remember, should you mistakenly forget. Here I stand, a nude tsunami stone. Thanks so much.
Beautiful, Meg. Thank you so much. And to hear more of Meg's work and from Meg about the book, be sure to visit our website, interlooplit.org/authors corner. There's lots to read about. Okay, next in poetry is Allison Goldweinberg.
And I just want to add the next 3 readers are the winners of our District Fray Interloop Writing Contest from summer 2021, and we are excited to have them here. It was judged by Jose Padua, who is amazing. If you haven't read his work, you should check that out also. Sorry to interrupt, but yes, Allison is our poetry genre winner.
Yay. So nice to see everybody. And thank you so much, Courtney and Rachel, for welcoming me into this supportive writers community, which we were talking a little bit about in our breakout, and how it's sort of a safe space to be a writer as opposed to a feeling of competitiveness and sort of jockeying. So thank you for creating something so special. To Jose Padua, who chose my poem, thank you. And I look forward to sharing it. I'm going to share 3 poems today. And the first is In Conversation with Water Lilies, which I'll read last. Each of these poems share similar imagery and themes, and in each his own way is a repudiation of the romance of pain. I'm going to begin with Don't Worry from my play Object Relations, which was written by the play's protagonist, Sam, who is a poet. Don't worry. I'm not Hamlet. For me, to be or not is really not the question. The answer, I am and I am not. Ophelia gathering pain like wildflowers, tucked in the hem of my gown, tripping into cool green refusal, the current and the past pulling me down. Can you see me? A goose in a gaggle of grave diggers, paddling past Hamlet, dumb on the shore, and Ophelia sunk with her rosemary and rue, propelling the story forward, wings flapping furiously upstream, forgetting I can fly.
The second poem I'm going to read is, like others did tonight, a place poem. This place is New Orleans, so it is appropriately degenerate. The depths of your desire. There are a lot of places I like, but I like New Orleans better. Bob Dylan. In '88, you could walk Magazine Street for miles of nothing, hungry as Gandhi, and eventually there would appear a health food store, temple to greens and cereals, twig-like fibers and solutions, grains to line your tongue, earned communion for the walk home to your sophomore bedroom near Audubon Park and the zoo. At dusk, big cats would preen and groom and roar, drown out the growls of your holier-than-thou stomach, both sounds signaling the insistence of an animal demanding to be fed. Yes, I nursed at Nola's breast, lips pursed against the garden district's bruise-hued clouds, body not rounding out, but winnowing down to its essential, a willow whose very name means lamentation. And that man who dashed my same path around the park, who jacked each daybreak against a tree as I jogged by, cock liberated from his athletic shorts, stroking long and hard, he belonged. So did the plump of ducks that once lined the banks of the Mississippi and sang to me from the book of Isaiah. You kept me from the pit, you put my sins behind your back. And so did the frat boy who dipped me 20 stories above the French Quarter, dizzily kissing me while I felt nothing but how perilously close to the bottom I was. I could have died for love of that city, drunk on deprivation, beauty beating me blacker and bluer than I'd ever been. Believe me, it was heaven. And finally, I am going to read Water Lilies Do Not Have Surface Leaves During Winter, the poem chosen by Jose Padua. Water lilies do not have surface leaves during winter. Adolescent girls root for you, extend scarred arms toward cloying curls, angling for ankles. Ungently you lay, unresting on the surface, always about to drown, a daisy for every nosegay, half in love with death. Madness is all we get from you, Ophelia. Our ragged fingernails dog-ear your pages, hearts assailed by crushes, rashes, braces. We wish to disappear into wisps of verse like you. Instead, we grow up, gasping for living things.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, next our nonfiction District Fray contest winner is Amy Linwander. Did I say that right?
Yeah, it's close enough. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mom. Thanks for coming out. And thank you so much for having me, Courtney and Rachel, Daniel and Kiara from the Inner Loop. And I just want to tell all of you that I was in a breakout with Allison, and I asked her not to be very good since I was following her. And she told me that she wasn't going to be very good. So now you can see what kind of a person Allison really is. So just kidding. All right, so this is, it's a nonfiction story. It's about my father. It's called The Many Afterlives. As it turns out, my father didn't actually die of pancreatic cancer. He faked his death and joined a funk band. I caught him playing trumpet at a 50th birthday party. Before his return, I pictured my father's afterlife as a never-ending game of baseball with his friends, other refugees whose families also fled the Nazis and found their way to the Bronx. They'd wake up the drunks, sleeping on the infield to be their referees. My kid's sanitized soccer games always made him smile. Sometimes my younger daughter plays my father's keyboard, employing the same pre-recorded background music he favored, samba. That's when I pretend that he is upstairs. When they first got to this country, my grandmother woke before dawn and made Austrian tarts to sell to bakeries. They escaped from Vienna by taking a bus to the border of France and running across, dodging bullets. My grandfather was held in a French labor camp until 3 years later when their visa, sponsored by cousins, came through and they immigrated to the United States. My father played tennis and golf, the picture of senior vitality, when he got his diagnosis. He dropped weight and took on a yellowish tinge. What really got him was that he would not live longer than his father, a smoker, who lived until 79. 24 hours now, the hospice workers would tell us in hushed voices after leaving my father lying on a hospital bed in the living room. He'd start the next day angry when he realized he was still alive. I surprised myself with how much pleasure I get from picturing my father in his hereafter scenarios. Some think you spend it with family, possibly on a cloud, but I know better. He passed 2.5 years in and out of hospitals, lounging on the couch in his thick sweatshirt with the hood pulled up, like the Unabomber's suburban cousin. Now he's young and spry and fielding line drives on neglected baseball fields. My sister says the trumpet player looks nothing like my father when I text her his picture. He's at least 30 years younger for one thing, she points out. But I say, who knows what shedding us as a family could do for a man. There he is, my father, taking a solo, not dead at all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Next, our fiction District Fray contest winner, Len Kruger.
Hello, everybody, and thank you to Interloop and District Fray and to Jose Patrick, the judge. This is called We Have Coyotes. My father called himself an entrepreneur, always chasing the $1 million idea. He wouldn't tell me what it was. I used to think a time machine would be nice, or a pill that cured cancer. He would travel to California for week-long meetings with investors, leaving me a stack of 20s for pizza delivery and the same 213 area code number where he could be reached in an emergency. I never had to use it. When I was 13, he took me to California for the first time. Are we staying at a hotel or a motel, I asked as we pulled out of LAX in a rental car. Neither, he said, eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel tightly. We drove for a couple of hours. First freeways, then straight 2-lane highways across the desert. We turned down a long gravel driveway and stopped in front of a house with jagged rocky hills looming behind it. On the porch were wind chimes hanging and a wicker mat at the front door that said, "Welcome, please remove your shoes." Shoes, my father snapped at me. He ran his hand like it was a comb across his hair. I took off my sneakers. The door opened. It was a woman smiling at me. "Hi, Brian," she said to me. "I'm Janice. It's wonderful to meet you." We went inside and stood in a living room with white shag carpeting. My father walked over to a television set perched in the corner. "How's this piece of junk holding up?" he said, smacking it on its side. "We need a new one," said a kid lurking at the edge of the living room. He looked about my age, skinny, glasses, a flat top haircut. "Ernie, meet Brian," the woman said. "Ernie, why don't you take Brian into the backyard and get acquainted?" Ernie stared at the socks on his feet. They were the same as mine, white with red and blue stripes ringing the top. "Now," my father said. "I'll fix us some lemonade," the woman said. "Maybe something stronger for the adults." "Definitely," my father said. Ernie and I slipped into our shoes on the front porch, and I followed him around the house to a metal gate that opens to the backyard. He lifted the latch. "Make sure this gate is always closed," he said. This was the first thing he said to me. The backyard was manicured and landscaped, a plush green lawn ringed with trees. A little brown Shih Tzu dog ran up to me. I bent over to pet him and he licked my hand. Do you have coyotes in Maryland? Ernie asked. I don't think so. We do. Do you know what a coyote would do to a little dog like this? No. Kill him and eat him. That's why the gate always has to be closed. Through the back window of the house, I could see into the kitchen. My father and Janice were talking and laughing. They drank a bright pink liquid out of tall, skinny glasses. But couldn't the coyote just jump over your fence? I asked. What are you, a coyote expert? Ernie said. Behind him, I could see a tree with lemons hanging off the branches. Is that a lemon tree? I asked. Duh, he said. Haven't you ever seen a lemon tree before? No. Ernie smiled. He pushed his glasses up his nose. If you can eat a whole lemon off that tree in 1 minute, I'll give you a quarter. Okay, I said. Ernie plucked the biggest lemon he could find and tossed it to me. He pushed a button on his watch. It made a beep. Go, he said. I tore the lemon apart, stuffing section after section into my mouth. The juice ran down my chin. I was squinting, it was so sour. I kept going. Done, I said. 57 seconds. Shit, he said. Shit. His head hung, his mouth twitched. Where's my quarter? I said. Nobody's ever eaten the whole lemon before. You must have cheated. Give me my quarter. Ernie's face scrunched up. I hate my mom, he said. He started to cry. My mom died 2 years ago, I said. She had cancer. Ernie nodded. He stopped crying and sat down on the grass and petted his dog. I sat down next to them and scratched behind the dog's ears. His fur was soft. Never mind about the quarter, I said. How often do you see my father? Lots of times, since like forever. Has he ever told you his $1 million idea? What $1 million idea? Ernie said. What are you talking about? Through the back window, we could see that the kitchen was now empty. We were on our own. Thank you.
Amazing dialogue. Thank you, Len. Okay, last but not least, in nonfiction, Rhonda Zimlick.
Yeah, Rhonda, we should mention, I'm sorry, Danielle was sick, so she couldn't join us this evening. So you're going to bring us home.
Okay, surprise. Thank you. And thank you, Courtney and Rachel and everyone at the Inner Loop for having me. And thank you to all of the other readers. This has been fantastic. I'm reading an abridged version of an essay that was published by Hash Journal last month. It's called For Crying. I see a bowl of Cheerios covered in a layer of sugar. The cereal has been sitting in the milk so long, the O's have expanded and the sugar has turned to a wet gray paste. The cereal is mine. I sit at the table in my t-shirt and underwear, and I cry for reasons I cannot remember. But I cry all the time at this age. I hear explanations like, she's just sensitive, or she's a weepy kid. My childhood is marked by red, swollen eyes and a raspy voice. My voice is what I think about as I sit in the doctor's office, see the scope and long tube hung on the wall. He'll look at my larynx, put that scope into my nose and down my throat. I notice how long the tube is, imagine it slide into my nostril, past my sinuses, down into my esophagus. Well, maybe not that far. This doctor is a specialist. He's the one that makes me think about the Cheerios. There must have been an event in your past that damaged the vocal cords so badly you developed polyps. Some event, singular, like I stood up at a hockey game during a hat trick and screamed at the top of my voice for the rest of the game. You must use your voice a lot, he says. By a lot, he means like a public lecturer, an audiobook voice actor, an opera singer. I am none of these. Have the polyps been there long? Are they cancerous? Are they from smoking? I smoked from age 12 to 33. They could be from smoking, he agrees. They don't look cancerous, but the only way to tell is to biopsy. But first, the scope. He sprays my nose with a numbing mist he promises is worse than the scope. It's not worse. The scope is a 30-foot snake biting my insides as it's forced into my skull. The scope is one of the most unpleasant experiences imaginable in my overactive imagination. Thoughts of torture and vacuums invade my mind. I push away images of gasoline pumps, fire hoses, penises. I settle on Cheerios. I see the brown bowl with speckled glaze. A spoon handle rises from its side. Crescents of milk fill the spaces between the O's. The quietest places exist under those small curves. My larger world is louder. Eat your pig trough, pig. You're such a baby. Loud, fat baby, piggy, pig. My siblings call me pig like it's my name. Mom says they do this because of me. They'd stop if I'd stop reacting, but I cannot stop. I cry until my voice breaks. When I cry myself to sleep, I wake up crying. I give myself the hiccups, dry heaves, headaches. Sometimes the heaves are not dry and acid fills my mouth. Sometimes I hide under the bed. My heart pounds in my chest when I hear them looking for me. My feral siblings run down the hall. They slam doors and overturn hampers. They run into each other and have their own skirmishes, sharpening their tongues and tossing punches. But I'm the one they really want. Little pig, no, big pig, a cacophony of laughter. Dad joins them in their taunting. Mom says he has a good sense of humor. He knows how to take a joke. You shouldn't cry so much. Did you ever think of that? I did, but I cannot stop crying. I cry my entire adolescence, my young adult life, my struggle with alcohol and self-medication, matching my dad's struggle with pills and meth. I cry until I cannot cry anymore, until I ask the doctor why my voice is so raspy, why it is slipping away. The scope rests. I see through the Cheerios to the doctor's office, to me with my head tilted back, watching the images of my pink throat glistening on the monitor. One polyp is glossy gray like the sugar on the Cheerios. The other is angry, red, and pointed. They face off on each side of my voice box like traumatized siblings. In 3 weeks, each will be surgically removed. In a month, they'll be found benign. In 2 months, I'll be able to talk again. For the first time in my life, I won't have a raspy voice. I'll start to sing. I'll take music lessons. I'll join a ukulele band. I'll read to my children. I'll become a lecturer. I'll use my voice for 1,000 positive things. And I'll still cry when I need to. I won't judge myself for crying. Thank you.
So powerful. Thank you. I'm a big crier too.
I think that's a message we can all take away these days. Use your voice and still cry.
Yeah. Thank you to all of the amazing readers tonight. Always such a deep inspiration, and the most important part of me and Courtney's lives. I'll just speak for both of us.
Yeah, you can do that.
So virtual round of applause for everyone.
Plus you can unmute and really clap. Holler.
I don't know if that works with the Zoom.
I know. It was
amazing. Roll your socials and websites and book links in the chat, and Courtney and I will kill time while you do that.
Yeah, we've been trying to keep up.
You said something. What was it?
Wait, I said something? Sandra said
no.
something. I do want to thank Andrew again for joining us as featured reader. It was lovely to have you. And you know, one of the things we really love most about Inner Loop is that we get to bring writers at all stages and phases of their careers and lives together. But we certainly couldn't do it without the support of those who are established and have been in the game for a while. So we appreciate that. And yeah, just want to make a general note. I'm seeing lots of good links going up in the chat.
Speaking of links, check out our website, dinnerlooplit.org. We keep it updated with event links, and the podcast is on there. And if you subscribe, you'll get our newsletter, which we try to get out once a month, but doesn't really happen. So we promise not to.
Yeah, we've been pretty good about it lately, though.
Pretty good.
Kira.
Monthly announcements, so you won't be bombarded with emails if you sign up.
That's right. Yeah, and again, as Rachel mentioned in the beginning, December will be in our planning month for next season, and would love to hear your thoughts and ideas on things. And hopefully, we'll be back at real life venues sooner than later. Yeah, it's good to see you all. Thank you for spending your Tuesday with us.
Thank you again for inviting me. This has been a real highlight of my week, and thank you to all the other readers. It was just such an honor to read with you and to hear your work.
Oh, thank you, Andrew.
We didn't get to meet your dog though, Courtney.
Oh, he's here.
He seems like a good sort.
How'd it come?
Is he being shy now?
Yeah, right. Just when you want him.
Yeah, exactly. Hunter, where'd you go? Come here. Come here. He's something near the front door has his attention. So
Is he like a Springer Spaniel? What is he?
oh, he is a treeing walker coonhound. Come here.
A what?
Pop up. Hi. There he is.
Oh.
He's a hound.
Okay.
Basically. Yes, I always joke on our retreat this weekend. I was trying to think of something to read, and Kira said, I want to read your dog stuff. And I was like, no, I'm tired of reading my dog stuff.
Every reading needs some dog stuff.
Agreed.
All right, everyone. Well, have a good rest of your week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, Billy. Okay, I kicked
What if you're removing people and they're like automatically checks to like